Good morning. We delayed a little bit because we were looking for quorum. It is the summertime, and people are doing what they do. So we always do introductions in the room, just to, for everyone to introduce themselves. And we'll start with Dr. Inyagi. Yes.
My name is Jerome. We have Professor Emeritus School of Public Health at the University of Indiana.
Okay. Dr. Reynolds.
Lawrence Reynolds, Flint resident, and getting my lead service line replaced as we speak.
All right.
Ryan was from the state superintendent. Rich Barrett, governor's office.
Pamela Pugh, City of Flint.
Jan Beecher, Institute of Public Utilities at Michigan State.
Good morning, Stacy Clayton, Governor's Office.
Morning, Captain Chris Kolensky, Michigan State Police.
Harvey Hollins, Governor's Office.
Brian Knowlton, County Commissioner.
Mark Valichek, Genesee County Health Department.
Jim Koski, Genesee County.
Good morning, Keith Craig, DNR Director, sitting in for Heidi Grether.
Nick Lyon, Director, Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Mike McDaniel, Fast Start Program, City of Flint.
Justin Londo, Auditor General's Office.
Eden Wells, Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Jared Wall-Hodgson, Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. George Cristiano, Michigan DQ.
Simpson Brown, DEQ. Brandon McQuaid, Office of Internal Audit. Drew Lasher, Department of Health and Human Services.
Larry Speckler, Treasury.
And we've just been joined by Dr. Laura Sullivan. Good morning, everyone. We have signers in the room, so they're going to be moving around, and do want to welcome everyone here. Today's agenda is just going to be a really, the most time we're going to spend on today is focus on the Water Rate Subcommittee report, and we'll be looking for a vote on that. But before we do all that, we will have some updates. Now, Mayor Weaver and also Sylvester Jones will be joining by phone, particularly during the vote. They're both out of state, I believe, and as well as the governor. So they're not here. So with that, I'm not sure who's doing the city update for Flint. Is it Dr. Pugh? Okay.
So Mayor Weaver has provided this update, and she just wanted to express that she's excited about Phase 4 of the Fast Start initiative, and looks like we are on schedule to reach the goal, and sure that General McDaniels will give a further, more detailed update. She also wants to make sure everyone is aware that she has reached out to the governor on the closing of the water pods and has expressed concerns with all pods closing, and believe that there's a meeting, there is a meeting that's scheduled sometime next week for further discussion. She also wanted to mention that the City Council voted to postpone the vote on the water source recommendation for 30 days. It was on the agenda for discussion by Councilman Mays, but died for lack of support for even a discussion. And so I think we'll talk, and she left room for public health updates. So the public health community has been discussing the closure of the pods as well as what this means for schools. And so there's many around the table who have been a part of those discussions, and I'm sure that that will come up soon. So just in expressing our concerns and being able to further advise the mayor on concerns of the closure of all the pods, and why we think that that's a public health a threat, or not necessarily a threat, but we have public health concerns as it relates to that. So there have been many discussions amongst the public health and medical community, and I think that we'll have further discussion on that.
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Pugh? Okay, Commissioner Nolan.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. I really don't have an update. It's just a couple of concerns that was brought to me by my colleagues. We know that when this water emergency started, that the county could only, I guess, statutorily receive about $100,000 reimbursement, but we still have that $1.2 million that was expended when this water emergency first started. And we know the Sheriff's Department, quite a lot of it was from the Health Department. And we were just wanting to know or get an update on that. And we know that Mr. Bearder came in and talked with the the Board of Commissioners last year around that. And one of the concerns is because we just saw recently that the University of Michigan Flint had about $800,000 for reimbursements, and they received about $400,000. So we were just concerned, and we want to know if, in fact, is that something that's still being looked at, and we would like to have some further discussion on that. That's one of the concerns. And second, we are mandated from a lawsuit that was filed against the Sheriff Department to put in a water filtration system. It's going to cost about $50,000, and we're going to be putting it in within the next couple of weeks. And because this lawsuit expires, I think, September 1, we know that we're going to probably end up with some additional lawsuits because of the inmates. So we wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of that as well, too. And if there's any possible way that there's some funding, because it's coming out of our general fund, we just wanted to make sure that you guys were updated on that. And that's basically it for my update. Thank you.
Any feedback or questions? Commissioner? Rich?
So, Commissioner, I'm very happy to sit down with you and talk. The county did provide what I would call kind of a 30,000-foot view relative to the expenditures incurred. There is an issue. I'd ask that Captain Kolensky join us in those discussions because there were several expenditures that were duplicative of what the state had already done. And those expenditures by the Sheriff's Department need to be reviewed because the lack of coordination created a funding situation that should have been avoided. But notwithstanding that, I'm sure Captain Kolensky and I would be happy to sit down with you and your colleagues to determine, what possibilities exist for some reimbursement.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, we have a update from water quality. George?
Thank you, Harvey. So I have a couple of things to share with everyone. First, I want to give an update on the core efforts, and we have very encouraging news to share. So far, to date, since we began the program, we have knocked on over 320,000 doors throughout the city. So when you figure there's about 30,000 residences, we've basically knocked on each door an average of about 10 times now. In addition, that has led to us having over 100,000 conversations with residents. We've had a tremendous amount of success in terms of being able to reach out to residents. One of the things that we started a couple of months ago was to focus on those residences where we've never had a conversation. And when we first started that effort, we had approximately 4,700 residences with whom we never had a discussion. And, we've left hangars and all that kind of stuff, but we just were never able to connect with those residences, even though we also had focused efforts on the weekends and all that. So we then did an extra focused effort on those 4,700 residences, and I'm pleased to share with everyone we're now down to 328. So we went from 4,700 all the way down to 328 homes where we've been unable to speak with the resident. And if you take a look at the math, we've knocked on those doors an average of over 30 times. And so we also looked at this spatially because we wanted to make sure that there wasn't a particular reason why we didn't reach out to these. And I can tell you that it's distributed throughout the city. So it could be a number of reasons why we haven't been able to reach out to these residents. But we keep on continuing to explore how we can get to everyone in the city, but I'm very encouraged by the fact that we've got that number down as low as we have. Now that we've been as successful as we have throughout the city, we're looking at different ways to deploy the core staff. And so we're now in the process of beginning conversations with some of the churches in the community where they're actually distributing commodities over there. And we're looking to see if we can potentially set up a table over near the area where they're distributing commodities. It would be a core table. We'd have the literature, and then we'd have core teams available over there so that residents can have an interactive experience. It would be on a neutral ground because one of the things that we found out with residents is it can be a little bit disconcerting when a stranger comes knocking on your door. So we're trying to create situations that provide opportunities for more discussion. At those tables, we'll have all the literature, and we'll also be able to make sure the residents are aware of the call for core opportunities so that they can schedule a visit at their home so that they know that core is going to be there and hopefully make the experience that more in depth. Moving on to the fixture replacement program, that's going along very well also. To date, we've got over 2,300 homes where we've been able to replace fixtures. And the criteria that we've been using and will continue to use is in order to qualify for the fixture program, which allows the replacement of the kitchen filter and one bathroom fixture. If a resident has a test where they had over 15 parts per billion, either from the 1 liter sample or the 1 liter calculated sample with the new 2-bottle system, they automatically qualify for this. In addition, as CORE goes out into the community and we find homes where residents have fixtures that are either incompatible with the point of use filters that we're providing, or if they have broken plumbing, then they also qualify. And so I would encourage residents, if you want to have an evaluation of your home, please call the call for CORE number, which is area code 810-238-6700. And we can have CORE members come out, take a look, and if any of those 3 conditions exist, we can certainly get these residents on the fixture replacement list. The money for this program currently runs out September 30th of this year, which is the end of the fiscal year. We're looking to see if we can get that money carried forward into the next fiscal year. We've started those efforts, and I'll keep everyone posted to see if we're successful on that. And that's all I have.
Any questions for George? Dr. Sullivan?
When you said the money running out, that's just for fixtures. That's not for CORE in general, right?
That's for fixtures.
Right.
That's specifically for the replacement fixture efforts.
For the areas of the city that are in greatest poverty, let's say, do you see a difference or a success rate difference in them actually using these filters as you're having the conversations? Do they look at, okay, last time they didn't have a filter, but this time we came and they had a filter? Are you seeing an increase in use in those parts of the city?
I don't have information with that type of granularity. What I can tell you is anecdotally filter usage is up, and it appears as though the percentage of filters that are installed improperly or residents that are unaware of the maintenance requirements, that is going down. So citywide, I can tell you that the efforts have been having a positive impact, but we haven't broken it down demographically.
Okay. And one other question, as CORE is going around now, are they educating residents about the change in where they will be able to get filters as the pods are shut down, so that people know where to go for filters?
Well, once those decisions have been made, absolutely. Yeah, that's part of the CORE presentation is where resources are available. So as that information gets updated, that will be provided to the residents.
Very good, thank you.
Dr. Pugh?
George, I'm not sure if I'm clear. What do you mean by conversations, and can you tell me the number again that we
Yeah,
have?
so the door knocks is 320, greater than 320,000, and conversations is over 100,000. And the difference between the two is, if you go knock on a door, it doesn't mean that that person's going to answer. So by a conversation, I mean a successful visit where we've knocked on the door and the resident has answered the door, and we've had the opportunity to have a conversation. Now, the extent of that conversation varies wildly. Some folks will just say, hey, thanks for coming by, I've got it covered, everything's good, to, yeah, come on in, let's have the full-blown presentation, and everything in between.
Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks, George, for the update. And George, can you just talk when the Corps members go there? Do you have the number of the kitchen filters that have been verified by those Corps members? Do you? I have the number, but I wanted to just.
I don't have that with me.
Because I'm showing like just over 45,000 kitchen filters verified by DEQ. Does that sound?
That probably sounds
okay.
Right. I mean, and bear in mind, there's probably a lot of duplicates in there because, if you go to one resident 3 times, each one of those, if they allow you into the house, each one of those would count as one. So in terms of unique addresses, I don't know what that number would be. That would be a grand total.
Okay. Because out of those, I'm showing existing filters that have been verified by DEQ to be just over 38,000. So I think it's important to note that we have a significant number of verified filters on at least the kitchen faucets out there.
That's a subset of the 100,000.
Yes.
That's part of the conversation.
Any other questions for George? All right, thank you, George. Cap?
So just a few updates. We do continue to operate the 9 community points of distribution, or CPODs, as well as the warehouse in Flint. As George had mentioned, use of the filters by water customers continues to increase, and the core teams, as demonstrated, is doing a great job. So thank you, George, and your team for the outstanding work that you're doing on this. However, that said, we are pushing more bottled water out now than we ever have. Our daily average is currently 21,500 cases of water per day. Now, part of this is due to the increase in the warm weather, but we plan for that. We expect that to occur. But we've even exceeded last year's summer numbers already, and that peaked last August. So we're not even to that time of year when we figured we would peak. We're already seeing numbers above where we were last year. We have distributed over 6 million cases of water as of July, I think it was July 19th, the last time I got my numbers. On average, the number of people from March to June who go through the CPODs for bottled water is about 90. That's the average. The average range of people going through the CPODs, so from 1 to 9, lowest I think is averaged about 47, the others about 173. I think we have 2 pods that's just over 100 people visiting today. And I share that just so you have an idea of some of our numbers. But we do believe that people from outside of Flint are coming in, visiting the CPODs, visiting some of the other distribution locations, and obtaining bottled water. I do think it's time for us to reevaluate with the city the verification process to minimize those who are taking advantage of the commodities that are meant for those affected by this event, that being the Flint residents as well as those on the Flint water system. I have a lot of anecdotal evidence. We try to follow up as best we can. We have seen bottled water outside of Flint, heading out of Flint in cars. I know they can always get it at a local store, but based on the amounts of water we've seen in some of these cars, it's clear to me that we have to reevaluate our process at this time, especially based on where we are with the amount of filters that have been pushed out there and the work the Corps team has done. 159,160 filters have been distributed through July 19th. From our records, there's some other volunteer organizations that may have or have distributed some I'm certain we're not aware of. And 351,342 cartridges, those are the replacement cartridges, have been distributed. And I'm not going to get into any of the core team information, as George hit on that very well. I do want to say, though, that the core team, the warehouse, everything that we're doing, we are very synced up. There's a DEQ representative tied to the warehouse, so those conversations are always happening, so we know what they need. We actually set commodities aside in the warehouse just for core to make it easier or to facilitate them picking them up. So with that, Harvey, that is the end of my report, pending any questions.
Any questions for Captain Kalinsky?
Yes.
Dr. Reynolds.
Yes, the perennial question that George is very familiar with. If there's a boil water advisory, are there sufficient filters to distribute? Because we will have to change filters as soon as the advisory is over.
Well, I can't answer the technical piece of changing the filter, but we do have, sir, a significant number of replacement cartridges, and as we hit our trigger points, we will always reevaluate that. I believe at this, well, I can tell you, sir, we have a lot. I would rather, we have a significant number of replacement cartridges in reserve.
All right. Any other questions for Captain Kalinsky? Okay, seeing none, we have a dashboard update by Scott Hippica.
Good morning. Thanks, Harvey. So in terms of all the items that I track, I'll start out with the governor's 75-point plan. So of the 75 items, 60 of those are complete in one shape or form. So, and by that I mean we either frame them as complete or complete ongoing. So that's a percentage of 80% at this time. We subcategorize those into short, intermediates, and longs. So the short-term items were 33 of 34. For the intermediates, those are 16 of 16. And for the long terms, those are 11 of 25. So from my swim lane at this point, we are completely on track with regards to those 75-point plan items. Within the Flint Water Advisory Task Force report, which some of the folks in this room helped build that report, if you recall, there were 44 recommendations in that report. We have 13 are complete or complete ongoing. 9 of those were referred, meaning they were given to the city or the EPA or the county. And then we have 22 of those are in progress. So again, from my position, we are on track with the Flint Water Advisory Task Force report recommendations as well. Insofar as the Flint Action Tracker website, we are going through a revision of that, so we're going to be, the intent is to launch by about 1 August an updated version of that website that will continue to be a little bit more user-friendly than what the current platform is as it exists today. It'll make it a little bit easier for residents to be able to kind of dive down into more details for those that want to, and it'll also include different videos about sort of success stories and different items that will allow the city to articulate some of its successes as well as the county and state. And then last but not least, based upon feedback from the community, we put together a phone app. It's called My Water Tests. It's available in both Android and in your Apple iOS versions. Again, it's called My Water Tests. We ran a pilot with our partners at Flint Cares, and we had some of their folks give us feedback on that. This is version 1. We intend to take feedback from different folks who want to give it to us and continue to make this better. The intent of the phone app is when you go into it, you'll upload your address, and you'll be able to see all of your water test results from as many water tests as you've submitted. You'll see all those in one location. So it'll have all your water test results, as well as you'll be able to put in when you changed your filter last, and the phone app will automatically give you a reminder as to when you need to change your filter. And that's a tidbit that was requested as well, so we responded in that capacity. And then if you click through the various tabs on the app, it lists all the resources available in the community. There's a map of where it actually shows the physical locations of the pods and the help centers. And if you allow the app to gauge your location in terms of just accepting that particular item, then obviously you'll be able to know which pod is the closest to you. And then last but not least, there's one more tab, which is a description of the core program, as well as example flyers that the core program is currently distributing. So that's the phone app. Again, it's available in both iOS and Android. We're pretty excited about being able to roll this out today. I would encourage the folks in this room to take a look at that. And again, you can plug in into your address, Dr. Sullivan, and you'll be able to see all your results. So I see you have your hand up. What can I answer for you?
The information about an individual's water test, is that password protected?
No, because that information is publicly available right now, where anybody can see each other's water results, the way it's listed right now on the state's website. So we again took the same data set. It just sorts by the individual when you load your address.
I think there might be some concerns about, given that it's an app and that information could be perhaps hacked. I think that there are some because residents have seen increases in insurance and that kind of thing based on their water results. I don't know if it's possible, if just that part can be somehow protected with a login or something, I don't know. But given that it's up on the cloud, I think that there might be some concerns about that could affect my resale and my insurance. It's just a thought.
Sure, yeah. I mean, given that the information is all up on the web today as it exists through the testing protocols that exist for the state right now, I guess this is where I want to be sensitive. I certainly don't want to not be responsive to the question or the concern here. Yeah. I think we'd have to look at that just based upon what's available now versus.
Right, I understand.
Yes, ma'am. So,
Scott, so there's no personal identifying information with this. It's just pulling from the same set that's already existing online, correct?
That's correct, yes. And then it doesn't, by way of example, if you loaded your address and I loaded your address, it's not going to cross-pollinate your filter testing.
Oh, I understand that,
yeah, it's just the data, it's the trigger in the phone. Yeah. Any other questions for me, please? Thank you.
But that's a very important point that you raised, Dr. Sullivan. I mean, I think it's you want to see resale values go up in the city of Flint, not be hampered by other information. So
I mean,
thank you
it's
for
really great that it's a sort of it says to the resident, yes, we're keeping track, right? Yes, we're monitoring it. Yes, we're keeping track. This is important, and that is something that I know residents asked for at the very beginning. Mm-hmm. But once it started to be used by realtors and insurance companies, residents started to say, "Wait a minute, I don't think I want anybody to be able to see my test results." So.
Just to know, I like being the optimist. The good news is that if you are trying to sell and the test results are positive, I would think that would be beneficial. So I think we also have to look at that side of this too. So.
Thanks. Awesome point. Okay, we have a Flint water source update by Rich Barrett, and I'm not sure, is the mayor on the line too? Not yet? Okay.
No. Okay.
Go ahead, Rich.
So, as everyone knows, Mayor Weaver made her long-term source water recommendation in April to City Council. April through July, several meetings were conducted individually and collectively to brief City Council members and the public on the details of the source water recommendation. I participated along with John Young, former CEO of the American Water Works Association, in meetings with each council member after Mayor Weaver's announcement, and then again several weeks later in June with 7 of the 9 council members. We did have invites for follow-up visits with all 9 council members, but 2 members were unavailable, one due to an incarceration and another was recovering from cataract surgery. We've continued to make subject matter experts available to deal with council members on demand. During that same period of time, several entities reviewed and endorsed the mayor's recommendation, including this body, the FWICC, and the American Water Works Association, and leaders from the Mott Foundation, the Concerned Pastors for Social Action, and the Genesee County Flint Chamber of Commerce, to name a few. In mid-June, City Council was asked to take the resolution up in committee and to vote on it before the end of June. They chose to postpone the vote in June and again in July, and to not offer any alternative recommendations to the long-term source water issue. So given that the City of Flint is paying for 2 water sources and does not have a favorable long-term contract with the Great Lakes Water Authority, lack of action on this issue is costing the city an extra $600,000 each month. The city's projected that it will deplete its water and sewer fund reserves by the 4th quarter of 2018, which will necessitate a significant rate increase for residents and businesses if this is not resolved. So these actions and inactions have necessitated the state's petitioning of the federal court to determine if proper authority exists for Mayor Weaver in the state of Michigan to move forward on the execution of the agreements to secure a long-term water source on behalf of the people of Flint. And a preliminary hearing with Judge Lawson has been confirmed for August 1st. And that concludes my update.
Okay. Any questions for Rich on the update?
I just have one question. Rich, I'm not good at figures, but as I understood it, the city is literally losing $9 million a year between the amount that they are paying now, $21 million, between GLEWA and then the debt service to KWA. And in the new agreement would be $12 million. So they're losing $9 million a year, I understand, correct?
That's basically correct, General. The numbers break out as follows. $7 million relates to the bond responsibility, the bond obligation for the KWA water source, and $2.4 million is the current. I'm sorry, that may not be exactly right. I think it's $2.4 million is the savings that would be realized from a long-term contract with GLEWA versus the Great Lakes Water Authority only has 2 kinds of contracts. They have a 30-year contract, which all of their wholesale customers have, and then they have what's not a 30-year contract. It could be 1 year, it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years, but whatever it is, it's the same amount if it's not 30 years. And that's the situation Flint is in now, and Great Lakes Water does not have the authority to provide short-term contracts without triggering a renegotiation for all of its water customers across the 4 million person customer base. So that's the reason for the long-term contract and why the savings are very significant to the city of Flint. But your estimation of roughly $9 million is accurate when you combine the difference between short and long-term contract cost and the $7 million relative to what the bond obligation for KWA, a water source that they're not using, is costing.
So I'm no expert in math, of course, but $9 million a year would be divided by 12 would be more like $750,000 a month. Is there something that reduces it down to $600,000 a month?
Yeah, because I didn't want to overstate the problem. You're exactly right, but because Flint is under a short-term contractual obligation now, I took the long-term savings of $1.8 million versus the current short-term cost.
All right, that explains it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Rich? Water source? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move into the recommendations from the Water Rate Subcommittee. And I want to basically begin by thanking the committee members. We had a pretty decent group of folks working on it. Dr. Beecher certainly was here. Will be explaining these recommendations as questions come up. Eric Rothstein, Sylvester Jones, Vicki Van Buren, Eric Scorzone, Larry Steckelberg, Angela Demkowski, Dr. Sullivan, Schuler Davis, Robert Benzik, Jaleesa McDay, Dr. Inriagu, Natalie Pruitt, Cheryl Thomas, Dr. Pugh, Mr. Young, and also Dr. Reynolds. We met for a few months actually on this, and we have a pretty decent recommendation. The subcommittee's overarching recommendation is for a comprehensive and independent review of the state's approach to regulating water sector, including a focus on rates and affordability. It's just not speaking to Flint, but this is basically a recommendation that is applicable to statewide, as this FWICC body has been created to not only make recommendations in terms on behalf of Flint, but also segue those recommendations to benefit the rest of the state. The review should identify and address legal authorities and agencies' responsibility and resources for implementing current and future policies to address these recommendations, as well as barriers to implementation. And the ideas complement the findings in the 21st Century Infrastructure Commission report. There is a policy vehicle that exists in our state, and as a result of the 1996 amendments to the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, which required states to develop a strategy to develop technical and managerial and financial capacity for all water systems. The water systems have these three essential capabilities, are better prepared to meet service obligations and especially public health protection. And Michigan's strategy was published by the state in 2000. So there is an event, a document that that the state can actually modify or edit to include the recommendations or other recommendations that the governor sees fit to change the existing document. So we do have a vehicle that's there that the England administration actually pulled together. I believe it was England administration did this. You all have received these recommendations in May, received them again in June, and received them again in July. And with all the folks that we've sent this stuff to, we only received a couple of recommendations, notably from Dr. Edwards. And Dr. Edwards and also Mona Tisha is in Cambridge receiving a disobedience award. I guess that's a good thing. From MIT, it has to be a good thing. So, he did reply, and so you have these recommendations before you. And what I'd like to do is take you through each of the major recommendations. There are sub recommendations to the ones, and if I could, I'd like to have Dr. Beecher kind of read us through. And what we want to do is to take a vote on these recommendations in 5 votes. Now, if there are changes to any one of these recommendations, we'll pull that out, table it, and we'll come back to it. But we'd like to vote on them as a group, and so I would be looking for a motion to approve, for example, the accounting and financing recommendation. So, Dr. Beecher, you want to read us through these recommendations, and if you have any questions on what this really does, she is the expert, not me. So, Dr. Beecher.
Well, the pressure's on. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think this was a really constructive process, and I'll just reiterate that this is, this is something that I think is overdue, and I think we have a policy vehicle to address it in our state, as in other states. I mean, this is under federal law, this idea that you would build capacity, and I think we've done some really positive work here. But again, it'll be a process. When we developed the specific recommendations, it was a very iterative process. We sort of had baskets of ideas and a lot of brainstorming. It was very, very good. And then we sort of, reorganized. And so this is what we came up with. It's probably imperfect, and you could classify things slightly different, but this is where we are. So the first sort of start with basic ideas of accounting, finance, and planning, because those are so, those are the precursors to good rate making. Encourage enterprise organization of water utilities with political and financial separation from local governments and requirements for representative governance, accountability, and transparency. Those are widely held principles, I think, in the field of water utilities. Second, establish a statewide uniform system of accounts for use by water utilities and establishing revenue requirements. comprised of capital and operating costs, conducting cost of service studies, preparing financial reports, and benchmarking performance. There are available systems. This is with most of this, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's been 100 years of practice in this area on which we can build. Third, require drinking water and wastewater, stormwater utilities to prepare multi-year integrated asset management, human resource financial plans to ensure adequate capacity for meeting all applicable regulations and standards related to service quality with a review by a designated state agency. Again, that one is in particular, I think, consistent with the Infrastructure Commission findings. Fourth, establish a formal review and approval process by a designated state agency for major capital projects requiring debt financing to ensure proper consideration of project merit, regional alternatives, and ratepayer impacts. And that goes to the issue of costs as they will ultimately flow through to rates.
Okay, that's the accounting and finance and planning. May I have a motion to approve this as a group?
So move.
It's been moved and second, moved by Commissioner Nolan and second by General McDaniels. Any discussion on this group? Okay, seeing none. Oh, go
I
ahead.
did have one question, just a matter of clarification. I'm assuming that 3 and 4 are referring to the same designated state agency. I mean, just if you're going to create a planning process, it seems to me it has to be the same state agency, whatever that may be.
Right. That's a great question, and we did have some discussion of that. We decided not to go too far into implementation because we felt that the state would have to step back and think about, where existing authorities and jurisdiction lie. So that's a logical interpretation, but we decided to sort of stop at that point. Would you agree, Harvey?
Yes, absolutely. Jim?
Yeah, as you may know, my background is in stormwater. And in the Michigan system, stormwater, in most cases, is handled by the Drain Commissioner, Public Works Commissioner, that. I mean, for instance, it says an annual report. Now, a Drain Commissioner has got to do an annual report of all activities that happened on a established county drain. But like in Saginaw, we had over 1,300 specific county drain, and each county drain is a different district in a separate municipal corporation. So to do a annual report and an annual thing of how the if you worked on it, that would be fine. But there's so many of them you don't work on, and you have it, over through the state. I bet Genesee County's got several thousand also of these county drain districts. The paperwork of that would be really something to have to do. So the word stormwater throws a flag up for me to just look at the logistics of doing that.
Dr. Beach, you have a reply to that?
Well, I think in part 3, we're actually asking for a multi-year strategy, not necessarily an annual report. So I think, I think what we're trying to get to, though, is that the burden on customers is a combination of water, wastewater, and stormwater charges, if those apply. And so I'm not, we can clarify the language. I think we're generally looking for annual financial reporting from utilities, legal entities as utilities. And you're raising a good point, though, that to the extent that some of these functions are provided by another entity, we could say, or appropriate organization. But I don't think we're necessarily calling for anything that should be burdensome, again, relative to what they're supposed to be doing as part of the, good planning.
And in planning in future, for instance, in stormwater, it takes the citizens of a stormwater district to petition for the commissioner to call a public hearing to find out to do any work on a drain, which means even if a drain is failing in that, the drain commissioner can't initiate a project. A project can only be initiated by what's called a board of determination, that is started by the citizens who are going to pay for it. So I just want you to be careful of throwing stormwater in with the rest of this, because there's a whole bunch of laws in activity that you may have a lot of conflict. So be careful when stormwater is thrown in with the others.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion, and it's been seconded. Stacy, could you roll call?
Keith Cray.
Yes.
Mark Edwards. Mona Hanna Tisha. Harvey Holland.
Yes.
Sylvester Jones. Yes. Chris Kalinsky.
Yes.
Nick Corey.
Yes.
Jim Kosky.
Yes.
Nick Lyon.
Yes.
Mike McDaniel.
Yes.
Bryant Nolden.
Yes.
Lawrence Reynolds.
Yes.
Laura Sullivan.
Yes.
Mark Valakat.
Yes.
Vicky Van Buren. Karen Weaver.
Yes.
Brian Winston.
Yes.
Mike Zimmer.
Yes.
$15 yeas, 0 nays, 3 absent.
Thank you, Stacy. Let's go to the second section on cost control and cost recovery.
Okay, so under cost recovery, first, establish a statewide policy regarding non-revenue water, including leakage and loss, and requirements for system auditing, reporting, and remediation. Second, promote and incentivize cost-effective demand management to reduce system peaks and avoid operating and capital costs over time, taking the terms of wholesale agreements into account. Third, encourage water utilities to optimize operations, including asset right-sizing, and coordinate with other infrastructure providers during asset replacement and renovation. Fourth, encourage water utilities to adopt generally accepted policies and practices for the equitable allocation of costs associated with water utility capacity requirements. Fifth, encourage water utilities to build reserve or contingency funds consistent with generally accepted policies and practices related to capital asset management and emergency planning. And sixth, accelerate the replacement of lead service lines with funding by various means to mitigate cost impacts on water ratepayers, particularly low-income households.
Okay, may I have a motion to accept Section 2 as a...
So moved.
So moved by Commissioner Nolan.
Second.
Second by Keith Craig. Any discussion on Section 2? Seeing none, may we have a roll call? Stacy?
Keith Cray.
Yes.
Mark Edwards. Mona Hanna Tisha. Harvey Holland.
Yes.
Sylvester Jones. Yes. Chris Kalinsky.
Yes.
Nick Corey.
Yes.
Jim Kosky. Nick Lyon.
Yes.
Mike McDaniel.
Yes.
Bryant Nolden.
Yes.
Lawrence Reynolds.
Yes.
Laura Sullivan.
Yes.
Mark Valakat.
Yes.
Vicky Van Buren. Karen Weaver.
Yes.
Brian Winston. Mike Zimmer.
Yes.
15 yeas, 0 nays, 3 absent.
Thank you, Stacy. Section 3, rate and rate structures.
All right. First, advance adoption of just and reasonable rate structures that are legally defensible and promote universal and affordable access to essential water services, including lifeline rates, increasing block rates, and minimum bills with a water usage allowance. Second, require all water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities to publish tariffs annually and file them with a designated state agency to ensure transparency and accessibility. Third, encourage more transparent, inclusive, and participatory processes for establishing water rates and rate policies at the community level. Fourth, encourage refinement of cost of service studies in order to improve the efficiency and equity of cost allocation and price signals across and within customer classes, residential, commercial, and industrial. Fifth, promote ratepayer accountability and encourage water utilities to recognize prompt and complete payment behavior. Sixth, remove legal barriers to rate design under the Headley Amendment and Bolt decisions, and shield water utilities from frivolous legal challenges by redefining the cost of service in terms of public health protection.
May I have a motion to approve this section?
So move.
So moved by Commissioner Nolan. Second? Second by Eric Scorson. Any discussion on this section? General McManus.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't understand 3.6. Maybe it's just the way it's worded there. And I heard you hesitate, ma'am.
Right.
Should there be the word decisions as in court decisions after bolt?
Yeah, I'm going to check, there might have been, to see whether it's in the written document.
And then it seems like there needs to be a comma there, because when I read it through without, didn't realize that it was sort of a preliminary clause there, it was pretty confusing to me.
Exactly. I think in the editing, I think we need to say the bolt, court decision, comma, and shield water utilities from frivolous legal challenges. And that issue, by the way, is getting national attention. There was just a report that came out this week on that very issue, that nationally you see these legal constraints on having flexibility to consider affordability and rate making.
Harvey, just tag on that, Doctor. Is it fair to say that there was a fairly extensive conversation around the bolt decisions on the infrastructure subcommittee, that it was an impediment to refinancing, if you will, and on the rate structure?
Yes, and also in Detroit. So you're absolutely right. This is an issue getting a lot of attention. So the question is, how much can you do within the existing legal framework? How much may you, will you eventually down the line need some additional legal authority, state policy, possibly even a constitutional amendment to allow for the flexibility, not to dictate the policy, but to allow for more flexibility and protect communities from lawsuits?
So 3.6 would be very consistent with some statewide comprehensive conversations that are occurring.
Absolutely, I think so. I think we'd agree, right?
We have an amendment to Section 3.6. Commissioner Nolan, since you offered the motion, is it okay for us to have a friendly amendment to it?
Absolutely.
So it would read both court decisions, comma, and shield? Okay. All right. With that, any other discussion on Section 3? Seeing none, Stacy?
Keith Cray,
Yes.
Mark Edwards, Monahan Atisha, Harvey Hollins,
Yes.
Sylvester Jones, Chris Kalinsky,
Yes.
Nick Corey,
Yes.
Jim Kosky, Nick Lyon,
Yes.
Mike McDaniel,
Yes.
Bryant Nolden,
Yes.
Lawrence Reynolds,
Yes.
Laura Sullivan,
Yes.
Mark Valakat,
Yes.
Vicki Van Buren, Kieran Weaver,
Yes.
Brian Whiston,
Yes.
Mike Zimmer.
Yes.
15 yeas, 0 nays, 3 absent.
Thank you, Stacy. Section 4, affordability and consumer protection.
First, redefine water services and the cost of service in terms of the utility's obligation to provide affordable access for the protection of public health. Second, establish statewide water disconnection or shut-off rules and standards consistent with public health, that should say protection, and a business case for compassion. Third, promote the development of efficiency programs such as leak detection and fixture replacement as a means of targeted assistance to low-income households with authorized recovery of costs through rates. Fourth, enable water utilities to offer payment plans, including plans with arrearage forgiveness or bill discounts that facilitate payment compliance and reduce utility collection expenses. Require all water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities to publish tariffs annually. And you know what? That's already up above, so that should be deleted. Second sentence. Fifth, develop protective policies for water ratepayers who are renters, including regulation of submetering and penalties on landlords for non-payment of water bills from rental income. Sixth, establish an independent statewide appeals process for consumer complaints as well as processes for resolving disputes over service quality and rates as an alternative to legal remedies. Seventh, require remediation action plan for utilities that fail to meet service quality standards and regulations.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve this section?
I so move, but with 2 proposed amendments.
Sure, let's get a second first.
I'll second it.
Okay, so General McDaniel's motion, and second by Commissioner Nolan. Okay, General McDaniel's discussion?
Yes, as to recommendation 4.2, that the word projection be deleted and replaced with the word protection.
Okay.
And then secondly, in 4.4, that the second sentence that starts require all water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities through the end of the sentence and accessibility period be deleted as it is duplicative of recommendation 3.2 already approved.
Okay. You made the motion. I'm assuming that's friendly. Anyone has any concerns with that? Okay. Any other discussion on this section?
Could I just have clarification as to in 4.1 what the phrase redefine water services means? What's the anticipated scope of that?
Well, I think that this is something Eric Rothstein feels really passionate about, and I frankly agree, and that is that we tend to have a very narrow and economics-based idea of the cost of service and the way and why we deliver it, which has sort of migrated us away from the core public health dimension of water. So we're saying, and the other thing is, from a legal perspective, if you redefine service somehow, you might have a better chance in coming up with solutions that are consistent with the law. Because as long as there's a conflict between, what service is, or, how service is defined, you can run into those legal issues.
Would it be fair then to say that the phrase redefine water services in recommendation 4.1 is then expanded upon in recommendations 4.2 through 4.7?
Yes.
Thank you.
Dr. Sullivan?
We talked about this in the committee, and I don't know if there's a way to incorporate it, but I would like to be able to reply to requests from residents. And that is, when we're talking about consumer protection and affordability, maybe this is implied, but is there something here that helps a resident who doesn't want to pay for water that's unsafe?
That's a great question. I think it might be implicit in the idea of a dispute resolution process.
Okay.
Because I would certainly think that would be something in other contexts that would be taken into account.
Okay.
If I could just comment, continue the discussion, Mr. Hollins. I would be loath to indicate that directly because I think we're trying to build consensus around these recommendations. But I do believe, Dr. Sullivan, that it's implicit in 4.4 and 4.6.
Thank you.
Any other points of discussion on this? Seeing none, Stacy, roll call, please.
Keith Cray,
Yes.
Mark Edwards, Mona Hanna Atisha, Harvey Hollins,
Yes.
Sylvester Jones, Chris Kalinsky,
Yes.
Nick Corey,
Yes.
Jim Kosky,
Yes.
Nick Lyon,
Yes.
Mike McDaniel,
Yes.
Brian Holman,
Yes.
Lawrence Reynolds,
Yes.
Laura Sullivan,
Yes.
Mark Valiquette,
Yes.
Vicki Van Buren, Karen Weaver,
Yes.
Brian Whiston,
Yes.
Mike Zimmer,
Yes.
15 yeas, 0 nays, 3 absent.
Okay, thank you, Stacy. And the very last section is general state policies and incentives. Dr. Beecher.
Grants and link state incentives such as grants and loans to utility performance improvement goals, including cost control, utility performance improvement goals, including cost control, asset management, operational efficiency, and cost-effective regional solutions. Second, support water utilities in developing technical, managerial, and technical, financial, technical, managerial, and financial capacity, consistent with state water policy goals. Third, require testing for and disclosure of lead risks in service lines and premise plumbing at time of property transfer. Fourth, consider establishing state permit fees for large volume withdrawals by entities other than public suppliers and devote these funds to water regulatory programs. Fifth, develop policies that recognize the unique affordability challenges and public health risks associated with community poverty, fiscal distress, emergency management, and population loss. And population loss was added by Professor Edwards. Sixth, consider institutional mechanisms equivalent or comparable to economic regulation to promote transparency, accountability, and sound practices with the level of oversight based on system conditions and capacities, and opt-in or opt-out provisions as appropriate.
So we have Section 5. May I have a motion to approve this?
I'll move it with any necessary corrections.
Okay. Support has been moved by Commissioner Nolan and supported by Jim Kowski. Any discussion on this section?
Could I offer a friendly amendment?
Yes, sir.
That in recommendation 5.2, it be revised to read, support water utilities in developing technical, managerial, and financial capacity consistent with state water policy goals, which would require deleting the second use of the word technical and replacing it with the word financial.
Okay.
I will accept that friendly amendment.
Thank you. Any other points of discussion on this? General McDaniel.
Again, just for clarification, in 5.4, there's a reference to large volume withdrawals by entities other than public suppliers. Does that include any use of the state's groundwater?
Well, I think, again, we're giving a broad recommendation to consider, potential funding or taxation instruments to extraction fees to support sound environmental and public health regulation, and that just seems like a logical one, so we just put out there for consideration.
Yep.
It seems logical to me as well. I just wanted clarification.
Dr. Reynolds?
Might I add to that? I'm very concrete, so when I hear someone pays $250 a year for a permit to withdraw, 400 gallons of water per minute, while we may be paying more for bottled water than for gasoline, and our water rates are going up, it's a cause for concern. So pardon me for being so concrete.
Apology accepted. I agree with you.
Any other discussion on Section 5?
Hey, Harvey, can
Oh,
a
go ahead.
non-voting member ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, it's 5.6. Can you provide an example of what that I guess, looks like when we consider what those items might mean? Can you give me an example, please?
Yeah, so we had a fair amount of discussion about this because, as you know, my background's in economic regulation. So, and Michigan's one of the states that does not have authority vested with the PSC for water systems. But that said, the tools used in economic regulation are often adopted and adapted to, to other sectors. And in some states, they even, Indiana, for example, actually has a provision where large municipalities can opt into economic regulation by the PSC. Now, they have to pay a fee for it, and they have to abide by those rules and regulations. That's one option. But on the other hand, there's also, again, there's uniform systems of accounts, there's practices, there's auditing practices, there's tools already out there that could be adopted not necessarily through a regulatory process, but through a capacity development process or other public policies. So, and even education, right? Even just getting out into the field, something Eric and I have talked about, maybe providing workshops and things. So short of full-blown economic regulation, there's some things you can do. But we thought we'd be remiss without mentioning that there are economic regulatory frameworks and tools.
Captain Kolensky.
On 5.5, I have a question, because in it we're talking about affordability challenges as well as public health risks, and the term emergency management is used in the end of the sentence. So I think the clarification of, are we talking fiscal emergency management? Are we talking emergency management in the context of natural disasters? So I just think that needs to be clarified a little bit. Or is it both?
Go ahead, take a second.
I would actually say, from my perspective, stepping back and looking at the experience in Flint and frankly in other places that have experienced the unexpected, I think when there is an emergency, there should be some alarm bells that go off about ensuring that public health and environmental protections are going to be in place as you weather that particular storm, whatever it might be. So that's a really good question. I don't think we really defined it here, but I'm actually comfortable with it being the generic emergency. But
I would just maybe offer up, because you already talked about fiscal distress, that maybe changing that to emergency and disaster management, and I think that would put
Yeah.
context to it.
I agree.
Commissioner Nolan, is that a friendly amendment? Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Very friendly.
Fiscal distress, emergency, and disaster management, that's how you had it?
Yes,
Okay.
emergency, just add and disaster
Okay.
management.
Hey, Harvey, I have one more. So 5.3, request, or the require testing for and disclosure of lead risks in service lines and premise plumbing at time of property transfer. Can I ask why just lead?
Where are you going with that?
Just,
Should it be more generic?
If I can, because I had the same question, should it include, for example, copper?
yeah, or
Yeah.
galvanized.
Yeah.
You know.
Perhaps you could say, lead, or other identified risks or something, sorry. Well, I think, regulated,
But today we're talking about lead and copper, right?
Yeah.
Tomorrow might be something different.
right.
Okay.
I would say, other disclosure of relevant risks or something like that, and that could be determined by appropriate agencies.
Anyone want to?
Harvey, can I add to the conversation here?
Go ahead, George.
I think while I appreciate the comments that have been made, I think we need to consider what we're trying to achieve here. Oftentimes, contaminants in water, what you have in the supply or coming out of the plant, that's what will show up at the tap. Here, we're talking about a situation where premise plumbing has an impact on the water. And so lead has an acute sensitivity there. Copper is a long-term exposure sort of thing unless someone has a particular sensitivity to copper. So I would just caution that we don't open this wide open because that's going to create some unintended consequences.
Okay, and given that information, lead and copper, would that be fine for everyone? Just keeping it narrow that way? General?
Mr. Hollins? I guess I need a little more clarification then. I was reading this when it says requiring testing for and disclosure. Those meant two different things to me, obviously, since they were both there. Testing for means you're testing the water. Disclosure may mean that you're looking at the types of plumbing in the home. So that's how I was reading that, and if that's not intended to broadly include both, I think we need further clarification. Thank you.
The analogy we were using was if you sold your home, like I have in the past, with radon test and disclosure to the buyer, so that then you can resolve any remediation prior to sale.
Agreed, but wouldn't we want it to both look at water quality and the pipes themselves, the plumbing itself? Since we've seen both of those as potential issues in the city of Flint?
I would think the term lead risks tends to encompass that, but I defer to the experts.
I would just reiterate what I said before. I think we need to be very careful. I wholeheartedly agree with the term lead. If we're talking about lead and copper risks, are we then saying any home with copper plumbing has a copper risk? I think we're going to have some unintended consequences here. I wholeheartedly agree with lead, and I would just caution us about having unintended consequences.
I withdraw my suggestion of adding copper because as I stated the second time, I believe the words testing for and disclosure of cover both the water quality and the pipes.
Okay. Nick?
So when it talks about the public health risks associated with community poverty, is this intended to bring in all health inequities that are associated with poverty? I hope.
Yeah, I think the discussion we had correctly centered on the fact, that poverty itself presents a risk, right? It presents vulnerabilities, and so that needs to be recognized more fully in our public policies.
Dr. Reynolds?
As a member of the Environmental Justice Work Group, there's the concept of cumulative impact, and so in some communities, one issue may not have the same impact as others. and the intention is to address that, because poverty does prevent the municipality as well as the individual from addressing those problems.
All right, we have the motion amended and the discussion had on this issue, on this particular section. So Stacy, roll call, please.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hollins?
Go ahead, General. Yeah.
Could we have just a statement of what, because we've had so much discussion, could we have a statement of which amendments have been accepted?
Okay, so the amendments that have been accepted, there's only one that I have, actually two. On section 5.2, we have, it reads, support water utilities in developing technical, managerial, financial capacity, and financial capacity with state water policy goals. So we eliminate the word technical and put financial. And then the last amendment we have is in section 5.5, where it now reads, develop policies that recognize the unique affordability challenges and public health risks associated with community poverty, fiscal distress, emergency and disaster management, and population loss. Okay? Those are the two amendments we have. Any other questions? All right, Stacy, roll call.
Keith Cray,
Yes.
Mark Edwards, Mona Hanna Atisha, Harvey Hollins.
Yes.
Sylvester Jones. Chris Kalinsky,
Yes.
Nick Corey,
Yes.
Jim Kosky. Nick Lyon,
Yes.
Mike McDaniel,
Yes.
Bryant Nolden,
Yes.
Lawrence Reynolds,
Yes.
Laura Sullivan,
Yes.
Mark Valiquette,
Yes.
Vicki Van Buren, Karen Weaver,
Yes.
Brian Whiston,
Yes.
Mike Zimmer,
Yes.
15 yeas, 0 nays, 3 absent.
Okay, thank you, and want to thank you all for the work you put into this whole recommendation. It will be put in a resolution form. We'll send that to the governor as recommendations from this body, and we'll also send you a copy of that resolution. I also want to thank Stacy, because she herded a lot of cats for a lot of months to get this to where we are. So thank you, Stacy Clayton, for doing this. With that, we have member concerns. Any member concerns that need to come up at this time?
Mr. Hollins?
General McDaniel.
Thank you. I feel compelled to circulate back, or circle back to the comments that were made about the recommended water source selection for the city of Flint. We've discussed this a number of times, and I think we need to keep discussing this until we get movement on this. As I understand it, based upon previous readings and upon the report today from Mr. Rich Baird, the city is losing $600,000 a month based upon the statement that the mayor made the recommendation to the city council in April. That means $1.8 million have literally gone down the drain. To put that into context, that would be 360 extra service lines that I could have replaced, which is roughly 15 entire city blocks, giving the average of homes that we do on each street on a city blocks. So that is money that is just hasn't been spent on anything else. It's just been wasted, and it could have been used for a very constructive purpose, which the city needs if the city council had acted sooner. Again, we are losing approximately 120 service lines that we could have replaced per month. This money isn't being used for any other project. It is just being lost, and it's being lost to the detriment of the citizens of the city of Flint. And having been out there almost daily for the last year, I feel very strongly that this is not in the best interest of the city and its residents. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other concerns, Doc? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I support General McDaniel, because once again I appreciate seeing those changes in my neighborhood, and it's essential. You must remove the source of lead. But we do have some other issues related to the court ruling that may lead to closure of pods, and we also have the larger issue of policies that will govern school water. And if we can get some clarification on when and how that will be addressed, that would be helpful to the residents of Flint.
So we have Rich Beard and also Superintendent here. So, Rich?
Dr. Reynolds, I share your concern. As you know, even over the last couple of weeks, members of my team and I have met with you and members of the Medical Society to understand the medical community's issues. We have a meeting scheduled next week with the mayor, concerned pastors who were part of the original mediated settlement, and we are absolutely discussing alternatives. Just because the state has the ability to close the distribution centers by September does not mean that there can't be an adjustment based on the needs, desires, and hopes of the community. So I would ask that you have just a little bit of patience. Let us work with the stakeholders in the community, and God willing, we'll come back with a solution that will address the concerns that have been expressed.
Mayor Weaver, I don't know if you're on speakerphone. I don't know if you had anything to add to hear what Rich Beard just said.
I wanted to add something to what General McDaniel said, as well as Rich Beard, and I wanted to thank General McDaniel for putting that the holdup in perspective as far as the money that we're losing and what could be done and why it's so important that we get this moved forward. The other thing, I appreciate Dr. Reynolds bringing up the water pod, because that has been an area of concern, and as Rich Beard said, if people will just be patient, we are in conversation. We've heard what the community has said, and we have some of those same concerns, and so we will be addressing this, just like Rich said, very, very shortly next week.
Dr. Sullivan, I'm sorry.
So I hear that there's going to be a meeting to discuss this. Obviously, the residents are very nervous about it, and I'm nervous about its impact on water in the schools. Will there be a press release or any kind of announcement made to the city once that agreement is made? And can we count on that?
That's to Mayor or probably more so to
Mayor or
Rich.
Mayor Weaver, could you hear that question?
I couldn't hear all of it.
It was, how would the residents be made aware of what comes out of the meeting?
We would let them know. I mean, after we have the meeting, we're going to come and let the community know what's happened. It won't be a secret.
Yeah, I would echo that. There's obviously a variety of issues here. There's logistics and contracts and agreements and a number of things that have to be discussed, and the purpose of the meeting is basically to discuss what a new and revised coalition might look like and might handle the operations. And we need to have those discussions. I'm sure that it won't be just a rubber stamp meeting. There'll be options presented and discussed. There'll be a small period of time to determine what can and can't happen. But it would be my hope, and we're very sensitive to the anxiousness of the community. And I would just echo Mayor Weaver's statement that this is no time to be lengthy or bureaucratic. It is a time to be creative and transparent, and that's our full intention.
Dr. Pugh?
And just to reiterate what I said in the opening statements, Dr. Sullivan, you've been a part of that, but I do want to make sure that all of the recommendations and the discussions that we've had as a medical, technical, and public health community has gone to the mayor. We've even had an opportunity to talk to Rich Baird and deliver those concerns that we have, as well as some potential recommendations that we will even be discussing with the school district.
Okay. Any other concerns? Okay, seeing none, we're at the end. The next meeting is scheduled, and I want to underline the word scheduled, for September the 15th, and we'll make a final determination sometime in August. The subcommittee on the rates was pretty much the last active subcommittee. We did have a policy group looking at the landlord-tenant arrangements. I'm not sure where they stand. But if it doesn't warrant another meeting in September, we'll let this group know well in advance, because you all have busy schedules, so you can clear it. But right now, there's nothing real pressing. I'm going to tell you that right now, unless something comes up from one of the committee members where we can put it on an agenda and then have the meeting in September. So that's where we stand. September, it will be, if we do the meeting, it'll be at the MSU building in Flint. So with that, I think we're adjourned for today. Thank you.